You know how some days start ordinary and end up changing everything? This is the story of how I went to fix a simple garage door malfunction and walked into something I never saw coming. A woman looked me straight in the eye and said 5 words. That turned my quiet Tuesday into the beginning of something. I'm still trying to understand. I've never felt this way about a younger man. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because the real story isn't just about what she said. It's about what happened after she said it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It was Tuesday, October 15th, and my day started the way most Tuesdays do. When you're a freelance handyman in a town where nothing exciting ever happens. Black coffee from yesterday's pot. Truck keys on the kitchen counter next to 3 unpaid bills. The kind of morning silence that makes you wonder if you're living your life or just going through the motions. I'm Henry Preston, 36 years old, and if you asked me that morning what I expected from my day, I would have said maybe $200 and hopefully no electrical fires. I was replacing weather stripping on old Mrs. Chen's back door when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. But in my line of work, unknown numbers usually mean emergency repairs and emergency rates. Hello, this is Henry. Hi, is this the handyman? It's the one who fixed the Henderson's fence last month? The voice was warm, confident, but with this underlying note of frustration that I recognized immediately. It's the tone people get when their house is actively betraying them. That's me. What can I help you with? My garage door is having what I can only describe as a complete nervous breakdown. It goes up halfway, makes a sound like a dying elephant, then comes crashing down. I'm trapped in my own driveway. I couldn't help but smile. Dying elephant, huh? That's usually the spring mechanism. Where are you located? Maple Ridge Drive, house number 47. The one with the blue shutters? And the completely dysfunctional garage door that's holding my car hostage. I can be there in about an hour. I'm Martha, by the way. Henry and Martha, I have to ask, is your car actually trapped, or can you get out another way? She paused, and I heard something that sounded like embarrassment mixed with determination. Well, technically I could back out of the driveway. But that would require me to admit defeat to an inanimate object, and I'm not quite ready for that level of humiliation. I laughed. Most of my clients are either panicked or annoyed when they call. This woman sounded like she was personally offended by her garage door's behavior. I'll be right over. Don't negotiate with the garage door while I'm gone. They never keep their promises anyway. Too late. I already tried bribing it with WD-40, Maple Ridge. Drive turned out to be one of those tree-lined streets where every house looks like someone actually lives there, not just exists there. Number 47 was a 2-story colonial with blue shutters that had probably been painted by hand. Flower boxes under the windows that suggested someone who cared about details. In a driveway where a silver Honda Civic sat looking sheepish. In front of a garage door that was indeed stuck halfway open. Frozen in what looked like mechanical indecision. Before I could even get out of my truck, the front door opened, and Martha stepped onto the porch. The first thing you noticed about Martha Hodgkins was that she looked like someone who had lived fully and wasn't apologizing for it. Maybe 50, maybe a little older, with shoulder-length auburn hair that had silver threads running through it like tinsel. She wore jeans that fit properly and a burgundy sweater that looked expensive but not pretentious. No makeup that I could see, the kind of bone structure that suggested she'd probably been beautiful her whole life and had only recently started to care less about conventional definitions of beauty. But what really caught my attention was the way she moved. Confident, purposeful, like someone who had stopped wasting time on things that didn't matter. She walked down the driveway toward me with a slight smile that suggested she found her garage door situation more amusing than frustrating. You must be Henry, the garage door negotiator, she said, extending her hand. Her handshake was firm, warm, brief. I'm Martha, and this, she gestured toward the garage, is my current nemesis. Looks like it's winning, I said, grabbing my toolbox from the truck. For now, but I have reinforcements. She pointed at me. Plus, I made coffee strong enough to wake the dead, in case we need to resort to extreme measures. I walked over to examine the door. The track was slightly bent, probably from years of minor impacts and settling, and the spring mechanism was definitely struggling. Nothing catastrophic, but the kind of problem that gets worse if you ignore it. "How long has it been doing this?" I asked, running my hand along the track. "About a week." Started with just a little hesitation, then progressed to full dramatic breakdown. "My daughter says I should have called someone immediately, but I kept thinking maybe it would fix itself." "Houses don't usually fix themselves," I said, checking the motor housing. Though I appreciate the optimism. Eternal optimist, that's me, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. There was something in the way she said it that made me look up from the garage door mechanism. She was watching me work with the kind of attention that suggested she wasn't just interested in getting her car unstuck, she was genuinely curious about the process, about how things worked, about the small mysteries of mechanical failure and repair. "You live here alone?" I asked, then immediately regretted it. Too personal, too soon, but she didn't seem to mind. "It's just me in the house. My daughter Robin lives about 20 minutes away, close enough to worry about me, but far enough to maintain plausible deniability about my questionable life choices." "What kind of questionable life choices are we talking about?" She smiled, a real smile this time, not the polite one she'd greeted me with. "Oh, 50-year-old woman living alone. Making impulsive decisions, refusing to act my age. The usual scandals." And that's when I realized this wasn't going to be just another routine repair call. The garage door mechanism was more complicated than I'd initially thought. What looked like a simple spring tension issue turned out to involve a bent track, a motor that was working overtime to compensate, and safety cables that had seen better decades. I found myself sprawled half under the door frame, flashlight between my teeth, trying to realign the track while Martha stood nearby, providing commentary. "Is it supposed to make that grinding noise?" she asked, as I loosened the mounting brackets. "Depends on your definition of supposed to," I mumbled around the flashlight. "Right now it's making the noise of something that's been ignored for about 5 years too long. Guilty as charged. My ex-husband always handled the garage door. After the divorce, I kept meaning to learn about these things, but somehow car maintenance and home repair kept falling to the bottom of my priority list." I slid out from under the door and looked at her. "How long ago was the divorce?" 2 years. Long enough that I should probably know how to fix my own garage door, not long enough that I don't still occasionally find myself waiting for someone else to handle it. There was something refreshingly honest about the way she said it. No bitterness, no drama, just the practical acknowledgement of changing circumstances. "Learning curve," I said, repositioning my ladder.
Most people don't think about garage doors until they stop working.
Story of my life lately. I didn't think about a lot of things until they stopped working. I was adjusting the tension springs when she said it, almost casually, like she was commenting on the weather. "I'm 53 if you're wondering, just in case you were doing the math." I nearly dropped my wrench. I wasn't doing any math. "Oh, sure. It's natural. Older woman, younger handyman, broken garage door. It feels like the setup to either a very good joke or a very bad movie." I looked down at her from the ladder. She was smiling, but there was something else in her expression. Not embarrassment, exactly. More like she was testing the water temperature. "Before diving in, which one do you think this is?" I asked. "It's too early to tell, but I'm hoping for the good joke." The spring mechanism required both hands and most of my attention, but I found myself acutely aware of her presence. She wasn't hovering, like some clients do, asking constant questions or offering unwanted assistance. Instead, she leaned against the doorframe and watched with genuine interest, occasionally asking intelligent questions about how the system worked. "So the springs do most of the actual lifting?" "Exactly. The motor just guides the movement." People think garage door openers are about power, but they're really about precision. The springs carry the weight. Metaphor alert. Paused, wrench in hand. Metaphor alert? Sorry, occupational hazard. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I used to teach high school English. Everything sounds like symbolism when you've spent 20 years explaining why the green light in Gatsby matters. Used to teach. Took early retirement last year. Burnout, mostly. 20 years of trying to convince teenagers that literature matters while administrators kept cutting funding and parents kept complaining about curriculum choices. She shrugged. I needed a break from caring so much about things I couldn't control. I finished adjusting the spring tension and climbed down from the ladder. What do you do now? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Right now, I'm what you might call aggressively unemployed, living off my retirement fund, trying to figure out what the second half of my life looks like. Any ideas? Several terrible ones, and a few that might actually work. She grinned. Want to test the door? I hit the opener button. The door glided up smoothly. No grinding, no hesitation, no dying elephant noises. Martha actually clapped. It's like magic. How did you know what was wrong? Experience, mostly. Plus, garage doors are honest. They tell you exactly what's wrong. If you know how to listen. Unlike people. Unlike people, I agreed. We stood there for a moment. Both of us probably aware that the repair was finished, but neither of us making any move to end the interaction. The October afternoon was crisp, the kind of fall day that makes you want to rake leaves just for the excuse to be outside. I should probably let you get to your next appointment, Martha said finally. Actually, you're my last call today. A pause. Well then, I should probably let you get home too. Whatever it is you do when you're not rescuing people from mechanical disasters, usually I sit in my apartment and wonder if I should have gone to college. She laughed, a genuine sound that made something in my chest loosen. College is overrated. I went to college, got a master's degree, taught for 20 years, and still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Maybe growing up is overrated too. Now you're talking. She walked over to her car, ran her hand along the hood like she was greeting an old friend. This car and I have been through a lot together. Bought it right after the divorce. First, major purchase I made entirely on my own. Felt very symbolic at the time. What kind of symbol? Independence, I guess. The ability to go anywhere I wanted without asking permission or checking with someone else first. She looked at me sideways. Sounds silly when I say it out loud. Doesn't sound silly at all. I started packing up my tools, but slowly. It's like maybe I'd forgotten something important and needed to figure out what it was. Martha watched me, and I got the sense she was doing her own version of the same thing. Henry, she said as I loaded the last of my equipment into the truck. Yeah, thank you. Not just for fixing the door, but for not making me feel like a helpless woman who can't manage her own house. You don't seem helpless? Good, because I'm not. I'm just figuring things out as I go. Aren't we all? And that's when she said the thing that changed everything. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something light and clean, like citrus and possibility. I'm 53, and I've never felt this way about a younger man. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge, the silence that followed. Martha's words stretched between us like a bridge I wasn't sure either of us was ready to cross. I stood there holding my toolbox. She stood there next to her newly liberated Honda, and somewhere in the space between us hung the kind of honesty that changes conversations forever. I probably shouldn't have said that, she said finally, but she didn't look away. Probably not, I agreed. But I'm glad you did. Her eyebrows went up slightly. Are you? Yeah. Most people spend their whole lives not saying the things that matter. And you think this matters? I set my toolbox down on the driveway. I think you wouldn't have said it if it didn't. Something shifted in her expression then, like she'd been holding her breath and finally decided it was safe to exhale. You want to come in for coffee? I mean actual coffee, not a euphemism? Though I should warn you, I make it strong enough to dissolve paint. I like strong coffee. Good, because I also made banana bread this morning and it needs witnesses. Kitchen was the kind of room that suggested someone who cooked for pleasure, not just survival. Copper pots hung from a rack above the island. Herbs grew in small pots on the windowsill. And everything had the lived-in feeling of a space that got used daily. She poured coffee from a French press into mugs that didn't match, but somehow belonged together anyway. "So," she said, sliding a plate of banana bread across the counter, "tell me about the life of Henry Preston, garage door whisperer and amateur philosopher. Not much philosophy involved. Mostly just listening to what things are trying to tell you. Everything tells you something. Usually, houses especially. They hold on to the emotions of the people who live in them. Happy houses feel different than sad ones." She took a bite of banana bread, studying me. "What does this house tell you?" I looked around the kitchen, at the cookbook collection that suggested ambitious cooking projects, the refrigerator covered with photos of what looked like travel adventures, the small stack of unopened mail that said someone who was taking their time with mundane responsibilities. "Transition," I said, "like someone's between chapters. It's very good." "What else?" "Potential. Like someone's getting ready to start something new, but hasn't figured out what yet." She nodded slowly. "And what gave that away?" "Flyers by the door that you haven't thrown away but haven't opened either. The travel magazines on the counter. The fact that your spice rack is perfectly organized but your junk drawer is chaos. You're someone who's keeping her options open. Impressive. You get all that from fixing my garage door? You get that from watching how you move through your own space? Some people live in their houses. Some people just exist in them. You're living." Trying to, she refilled both our coffee mugs. "The first year after the divorce, I felt like I was sleepwalking. Just going through the motions, you know? Teaching, grading papers, coming home to an empty house. Repeat. Then I hit 50, and something clicked. Like I suddenly realized I might have 30 more years. And did I want to spend them all grading essays about Romeo and Juliet? Hence the early retirement, the travel magazines, the unopened real estate flyers, in the general sense that I'm supposed to be doing something important, but I have no idea what." I sipped my coffee. She wasn't kidding about the strength. "What did you want to be when you were young, before you became practical?" She laughed, but there was something wistful in it. "A travel writer. I wanted to go everywhere, see everything, write about all of it. I had this vision of myself with a laptop in cafes in Prague, filing stories about hidden gems and local customs. Happened. Life happened. Marriage, stability, a teaching job with good benefits, the responsible choice." She gestured around the kitchen. "Don't get me wrong. It wasn't a bad life. Just not the life I imagined when I was 25 and fearless. Who says you can't still do it? Reality? Money? The fact that I'm 53 and have never published anything except lesson plans. So start now. Just like that. Why not?" "Just like that?" She stared at me like I'd suggested she take up tightrope walking because people my age don't start over. They wind down. They get practical. They buy comfortable shoes and learn to enjoy quiet evenings. Says who? Says, I don't know. Society. Expectations. My mother, probably, if she were still alive. Your mother's not here? What do you say? Before she could answer, we heard a car door slam in the driveway. Martha's expression changed instantly, becoming more guarded. "That'll be Robin," she said. "My daughter. I have a key, and she has opinions about everything." The front door opened, and I heard footsteps. Then a voice calling, "Mom, why is there a contractor truck in the driveway? Please tell me you didn't. Try to fix something yourself again." In the kitchen, Martha called back. "And I hired someone this time. Thank you very much." Robin Hodgkins appeared in the kitchen doorway, and I immediately understood where Martha got her bone structure. Late 20s, probably. Their mother's auburn hair, but worn in a sleek bob that suggested someone who spent serious money on. Haircuts. She wore a tailored blazer and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. "Oh," she said, taking in the scene of coffee and banana bread, and her mother looking more relaxed than I suspected Robin was used to seeing. "Hello, Robin. This is Henry." He fixed the garage door. "Henry, this is my daughter Robin, who worries about me professionally." "It's not professional worry. It's personal worry," Robin said. But she smiled as she said it. "Though I do get paid to worry about people, so maybe it's both." She looked at me. "Lawyer handyman," I said. There was something in the way she said it that suggested she was rapidly recalculating something. Well, thank you for fixing Mom's garage door. She's been complaining about it for weeks, but refused to call anyone. I like to handle my own problems, Martha said, which is admirable right up until the point where you can't, Robin replied. How much do we owe you? The question hung in the air, and I realized this was the moment where I either treated this like a normal service call or acknowledged that something else was happening here. We haven't talked about payment yet, I said. The job's done, though, Robin asked. The garage door's fixed, I said carefully. Martha looked at me, and I saw something pass across her face. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation, of course, she said, standing up. Let me get my checkbook. And just like that, the spell was broken. Martha's checkbook came out like a shield. And I watched her transform from the woman who'd been telling me about travel writing dreams into someone settling a business transaction. Robin watched the exchange, with the sharp attention of someone trained to read subtext. What do I owe you? Martha asked, pen poised over the check. 200, I said, though I could have easily charged more. The job had taken longer than expected, and I'd replaced more parts than originally necessary. She wrote the check with efficient strokes, tore it out, and handed it to me with a polite smile that felt like a door closing. Thank you so much for your help. Mom, Robin said carefully, weren't you just telling me yesterday that you needed someone to look at the kitchen faucet, the one that's been dripping for months? I saw Martha's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. That's not urgent. Water damage is always urgent, Robin said, then looked at me. Would you mind taking a look? As long as you're here? It was a lifeline, and we all knew it. Martha looked like she wanted to refuse, but Robin's expression suggested this wasn't really a request. If it's just a quick look, I said. The kitchen faucet was indeed dripping, but it was more than that. The whole fixture was loose, probably from years of normal use and settling. 20-minute fix, tops, but it gave me an excuse to stay. While I worked, Robin grilled her mother about mundane things. Had she taken her vitamins? Had she called about the property tax assessment? Had she heard from Aunt Kathy about Thanksgiving plans? It was the kind of conversation that seemed normal on the surface, but felt like a daughter checking up on a parent she thought might not be taking proper care of herself. I'm fine, Robin, Martha said finally. You don't need to manage my life. Not managing your life. I'm showing interest in your life. There's a difference, is there? After I finished the faucet and packed up my tools for the second time, Robin walked me to my truck while Martha stayed in the kitchen, presumably to avoid whatever conversation was about to happen. Can I ask you something? Robin said once we were out of earshot. Sure. How long were you in there? Before I arrived. About an hour, maybe a little more. And you spent that time talking? I wasn't sure where this was going, but Robin's tone suggested I should be careful. Some of it. Why? Because my mother looked happier when I walked in than I've seen her in months, and now she looks like someone just reminded her that she's not allowed to have fun. That surprised me. I don't understand. My mom is going through what I generously call a life transition. Less generously, I'd call it a delayed midlife crisis. Early retirement, vague talk about travel, making impulsive decisions. Last month she bought a motorcycle.
Oh.
A motorcycle. A 1975 Honda CB750. Hasn't ridden it yet. But it's in the garage next to her perfectly sensible Honda Civic, mocking her daily. Robin leaned against my truck. Look, I love my mother, but she's been making choices lately that seem designed to prove she's not getting older. It worries me. She seems pretty capable. She is capable. That's not the issue. The issue is that she's lonely and trying to fix that by changing everything about her life instead of just, joining a book club or taking up gardening. I thought about the woman who told me she'd never felt this way about a younger man, about the travel magazines and the organized spice rack and the way she'd talked about wanting to write about hidden gems in Prague cafes. Maybe she doesn't want a book club, I said. Robin studied my face. How old are you, 36? She's 53? I can do math, can you? Because 17 years is a significant age gap and my mother's vulnerable right now, and I'd hate for anyone to take advantage of that vulnerability. The accusation hung in the air between us like a challenge. I could have gotten defensive, could have pointed out that her mother was the one who'd initiated the personal conversation, who'd invited me in for coffee, who'd made the comment about younger men. Instead, I just looked at Robin and tried to figure out what she was really afraid of. I'm not taking advantage of anyone, I said finally. Good, because if you hurt her, if you let her think there's something here when there isn't, if you encourage whatever fantasy she's building about starting over at 53, I will make your life very difficult. Noted, I mean it. I believe you. She stood there for another moment, like she was deciding whether she'd made her point clearly enough, then turned and walked back toward the house. I sat in my truck for a few minutes, thinking about protective daughters and vulnerable mothers and the way Martha's face had changed when the checkbook came out. My phone buzzed as I was driving home. A text from my buddy Oscar Booth, who ran a small construction company and occasionally threw work my way. Beer tonight? Usual place? Sure need to vent anyway.
Hi.
The Riverside Tavern was the kind of bar that attracted regulars, working guys who came for cheap beer and conversation that didn't require pretense. Oscar was already there when I arrived, nursing a Budweiser and scrolling through his phone. Rough day? He asked, as I slid into the booth across from him. Complicated day. Complicated how? About the garage door call, about Martha, about the conversation in the kitchen, and Robin's warning in the driveway. Oscar listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or taking a sip of his beer. So let me get this straight, he said when I finished. You met an attractive, intelligent woman who's going through a divorce transition. You had good conversation over coffee and banana bread. But she made a comment about being attracted to you, despite the age difference. And then her lawyer daughter basically threatened you if you pursue it. That's about the size of it, and you're conflicted because maybe Robin's right, and maybe Martha is vulnerable, and maybe I'd be taking advantage of that. Oscar signaled the bartender for another round. Maybe Robin's a control freak. Who doesn't like seeing her mother happy with someone she didn't pre-approve? That's possible, too. Henry, let me ask you something. When you were talking to this woman, Martha, how did it feel? I thought about the easy conversation. The way she'd laughed at my observations about her house. The moment when she'd stepped closer and made her confession about younger men. Natural, I said. Like we'd known each other longer than an hour. Ow. When the daughter showed up, like someone had turned on the lights during a movie, Oscar nodded. That tell you anything? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, but somehow I knew. This is Henry. Hi, it's Martha. Martha Hodgkins. From the garage door, I remember. I was wondering, you ever do follow-up? Calls to make sure repairs are holding up? I smiled despite myself. Sometimes, if the job was particularly complicated. Mine was quite complicated. When would be good for you? It's tomorrow afternoon, around 3. I'll be there.
Ah.
Up, Oscar was grinning. Follow-up call, huh? Professional courtesy. Sure it is. Another beer? Yeah, I think I'm going to need it. I showed up at Martha's house the next afternoon with a legitimate excuse, a new weather seal for the garage door, that I claimed needed checking. The truth was, I'd been thinking about her since Oscar and I had finished our beers. Wondering what it meant that she'd called. Wondering what kind of follow-up she really had in mind. She answered the door wearing paint-splattered jeans and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, her hair pulled back in a way that suggested she'd been working on something. There was a smudge of sage green paint on her left cheek. You're redecorating, I observed. Guest bathroom. Figured if I'm going to have an identity crisis, I might as well have it in a freshly painted room. She stepped aside to let me in.
How's
the garage door holding up? That's what I'm here to check. But before we could head to the garage, a black Mercedes sedan pulled into the driveway. Parking with the kind of precision that suggested someone who believed parking spaces were a form of personal expression. The man who got out was tall, silver-haired, and wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. Oh, hell, Martha muttered. Friend of yours? Espand? And the timing is either coincidental or catastrophic. Richard Abrams looked like Central Casting's idea of a successful attorney commanding presence. Expensive haircut, the kind of smile that suggested he was accustomed to getting his way. He walked up the driveway like he still belonged there. He said, nodding politely. Then he noticed me. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Richard, this is Henry. He's checking on some repairs. Henry, my ex-husband Richard. Richard's handshake was firm and brief, the kind that established territory without being obviously aggressive. What kind of repairs? Garage door maintenance? I said, ah. Richard's tone suggested that garage door maintenance was somewhere below his pay grade. Martha, do you have a few minutes? There are some documents that need your signature. What kind of documents? Pension paperwork we discussed. The deadline's next week, and if you don't sign, you'll forfeit the survivor benefits. Martha's jaw tightened. I told you I needed time to review them with my own attorney. It's been 3 months. How much time do you need to sign a standard form? As much time as I want. I could feel the tension building between them like pressure before a storm. Richard glanced at me, and I got the distinct impression that he'd prefer to have this conversation without witnesses. I should check that weather seal, I said. Actually. Martha said quickly, could you take a look at the kitchen sink while you're here? It's been making a strange noise. It was clearly an excuse to keep me in the house, and we all knew it. Richard's smile became strained. Of course, I said. In the kitchen, I could hear their voices from the living room. Not the words, but the tone. Richard's voice was measured. Patient in the way that suggested he was explaining something to someone he considered slow to understand. Martha's voice was controlled, but with an edge that said she was working to keep her temper. The kitchen sink was fine, but I ran water and rattled pipes to justify my presence while trying not to eavesdrop too obviously. Being unreasonable. About this, Martha. The forms are straightforward. Nothing about our divorce was straightforward, Richard. Forgive me if I don't take your word that this is different. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? You moved in with Stephanie 6 months before you asked for the divorce, but I'm the one being unreasonable? The silence that followed was heavy with old resentment. When Richard spoke again, his voice was quieter. I've apologized for how that happened. Now, you've explained how that happened. There's a difference. I turned off the water and waited, unsure whether to announce that the sink was fine or give them more time. Martha, Richard said, I'm concerned about some of the choices you've been making lately. Robin mentioned the motorcycle, the early retirement, and now I see you're having work done on the house. Are you sure you're managing your finances responsibly? You seriously questioning my financial decisions? After what you did to our retirement accounts? I followed the divorce settlement exactly. You followed the letter of the divorce settlement while violating the spirit of 23 years of marriage. The conversation was clearly heading toward territory I had no business hearing. I walked back into the living room, where Richard stood near the front door holding a manila envelope, and Martha sat on the couch with her arms crossed. Sink's fine, I said. Just needed the aerator cleaned. Thank you, Martha said. Without looking away from Richard, Richard glanced between us, and I saw him reassessing something. Martha, we'll talk later about the paperwork. I'll call my attorney Monday. Don't wait too long. The deadline is firm. After he left, Martha sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the manila envelope he'd left on the coffee table. Survivor benefits. I asked gently. If something happens to him, I get part of his pension. But only if I sign the paperwork. Agreeing to certain conditions, she picked up the envelope, turned it over in her hands. He says it's standard, but Richard's definition of standard and mine don't always align. What kind of conditions? That's what I need to find out. But knowing Richard, there's probably something in there designed to give him continued control over my life, even after he's gone. She looked up at me, and I saw something vulnerable in her expression that hadn't been there yesterday. You had to witness that. Everyone has complicated exes, like Richard. After Richard left, Martha moved through her house like someone trying to shake off an unwelcome chill. She made coffee without asking if I wanted any, and stood at the kitchen window staring out at her backyard while the French press steeped. Want to see something ridiculous? She asked suddenly. Sure. She led me to the garage, where her Honda Civic sat next to what was unmistakably a vintage motorcycle. The 1975 Honda CB750 that Robin had mentioned was cherry red with chrome details that caught the afternoon light streaming through the garage window. It looked like it had been restored with care and attention to detail. It's beautiful, I said, running my hand along the tank. It's impractical. Richard would have a field day if he knew I bought it. She touched the seat gingerly, like she wasn't sure she was allowed. I saw it at an estate sale 3 weeks ago. The owner had died and his widow was selling everything. She said he'd restored it himself, spent 2 years getting every detail perfect, and then never wrote it because he was afraid something would happen to it. So you bought it. I bought it because I didn't want to be someone who spends 2 years making something perfect and then never uses it. She looked at me. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. I haven't ridden a motorcycle since college. I had a little Yamaha 250 back then. Used to ride it everywhere. Drove my parents crazy. What happened to it? Sold it when I got engaged to Richard. Said motorcycles were dangerous, impractical. Said we needed to start making responsible choices. She shrugged. So I did. I could picture it young Martha on a motorcycle. Probably fearless. Probably willing to go anywhere on a whim. The woman standing next to me now seemed caught between that version of herself and the person she'd become during 23 years of making responsible choices. You could learn again, I said. At 53. Why not at 53? She smiled, but there was sadness in it, because people my age don't learn new things. We refine old things. We get comfortable with what we know. We stop taking risks. That might result in broken bones or damaged pride. Says who? Says everyone. Says Richard. Says Robin. Says the voice in my head that sounds suspiciously like my mother. I walked around the motorcycle, checking the tires, the chain, the basic maintenance items. When's the last time you started it? Never. I mean, the dealer started it when I bought it, but I haven't touched it since I got it home. Want to try? Looked at me like I'd suggested we rob a bank. What if something goes wrong? What if something goes right? It took some coaxing, but I finally got her to turn the key and hit the starter. The engine caught immediately, settling into the distinctive rumble of a well-tuned vintage bike. Martha's face lit up with the kind of pure delight I hadn't seen since I'd met her. "Your sounds amazing," she said over the engine noise. "Sounds like it wants to be ridden." She turned off the engine, and the garage fell quiet, except for the ticking of cooling metal. "Henry, can I ask you something? Shoot, do you think I'm having a midlife crisis?" I considered the question seriously. The motorcycle, the early retirement, the paint-splattered clothes, the way she'd looked when she told me she'd never felt this way about a younger man. "I think you're having a life," I said finally. "What's the difference?" A midlife crisis is when you panic about getting older and do stupid things to feel young again. Having a life is when you realize you might have 30 more years and decide to make them count. She leaned against the workbench, studying my face. "Which one do you think I'm doing?" "The motorcycle suggests midlife crisis." "The way you talk about travel writing suggests someone who's finally ready to live. And what if they're the same thing?" "Then you're in good company." Most of the interesting people I know have had at least one spectacular breakdown that turned into a breakthrough. We stood there in the garage with the afternoon light slanting through the windows and the smell of motor oil and possibility in the air. Martha looked at the motorcycle, then at me. "I keep thinking about that woman," she said quietly. "The widow who sold me the bike. She said her husband spent every weekend in this garage, polishing chrome and adjusting carburetors and planning. Trips they never took, she said. He was always going to ride it next summer, when the weather was better, when work slowed down, when they had more time. But next summer never came. Summer never came. And I keep thinking, what if I do the same thing? What if I spend the rest of my life planning to live instead of actually living? Then you'd be like most people." "I don't want to be like most people anymore." She moved closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, close enough to smell her shampoo and the faint scent of sage green paint. "I meant what I said yesterday," she said, "about never feeling this way about a younger man. I know it's complicated. I know Robin thinks I'm losing my mind. I know there are a dozen reasons why this is probably a terrible idea. But I also know that for the first time in years, I feel like myself again when I'm talking to you, Martha. ... I'm not asking for promises or declarations or anything dramatic. I'm just asking if you feel it too." The honest answer was yes, I felt it too. Chemistry, the easy conversation, the way she made me want to be more thoughtful about everything. But I also thought about Robin's warning, about Richard's controlling presence. about the 17-year age gap that everyone seemed determined to remind us about. "I feel it," I said, and then she kissed me. The kiss lasted exactly long enough for both of us to realize we meant it. Then we broke apart like teenagers who'd heard footsteps in the hallway. Martha touched her lips with her fingertips, looking simultaneously pleased and terrified. "Well," she said, "that happened. It did. Any regrets?" "Not yet. You ask me tomorrow?" We went back into the house, and the atmosphere had shifted into something more charged, but also more careful, like we'd crossed a line and now had to figure out what that meant. Martha poured the coffee that had been steeping while we were in the garage. We sat at her kitchen table with the kind of heightened awareness that comes after kissing someone for the first time. "So," she said, wrapping her hands around her mug, "what happens now? I don't know. What do you want to happen? Honestly, I want to pretend I'm 35 again, and that 17 years doesn't matter, and that my daughter won't have an aneurysm when she finds out I kissed the handyman. But I'm not 35. 17 years does matter, and Robin definitely will have an aneurysm." I reached across the table and touched her hand. "What if we take it slow? See what develops?" "Slow like what?" "Coffee dates and hand-holding? Slow. Like getting to know each other without everyone else's opinions drowning out our own." She turned her hand over, palm up, and laced her fingers through mine. "I haven't done this in a very long time, Henry. The dating thing. The getting to know someone thing. I was married for 23 years, and before that, I was young and everything felt simpler. What feels complicated about it now? Everything. The age difference, for starters. So when you were in college, I was already teaching high school. When you were learning to drive, I was planning my wedding. When you were figuring out what you wanted to be when you grew up, I was already grown up and grading papers about Romeo and Juliet. And doesn't that bother you? The math of it?" I thought about it seriously. The math bothers other people. The reality doesn't bother me. What's the difference? The math is abstract. 17 years sounds like a lot when you say it. Like that. The reality is that you're the most interesting person I've talked to in months. You make me laugh. You think about things in ways that surprise me. And when you kissed me just now, I didn't think about how old either of us was. She smiled, but there was still worry in her eyes. "What about when people look at us? What about when they do the math?" "What about it? You don't care what people think. I care what some people think. I care what you think. I care what my friends think. To a point. But I stopped caring what strangers think somewhere around the time. I turned 30 and realized most people are too busy worrying about their own lives to spend much time judging mine. I wish I had that confidence. You do have it. You bought a motorcycle, remember? You took early retirement to figure out what you really want? You kissed a younger man in your garage 5 minutes ago? That's not the behavior of someone who cares too much about other people's opinions." She laughed, and some of the tension went out of her shoulders. Point taken. My phone buzzed with a text message. Martha glanced at it, then at me. "Go ahead," she said. "Answer it." It was Oscar. Emergency call. Mrs. Patterson's basement flooded. "Need backup if you're free." "Work?" Martha asked. "My friend's got a flooded basement, needs help." "Go. I'll still be here tomorrow, will you?" "Unless I panic overnight and move to another state." "Are you likely to do that?" "Answer probably." "Only 50-50. I stood up, then leaned down and kissed her again, more deliberately this time. When I pulled back, she was smiling. 40-60 now, she said. "In favor of staying?" "In favor of staying." I was halfway to my truck when she called after me. "Henry?" "Yeah, for what it's worth, when you kissed me back, I didn't think about the age difference either." Mrs. Patterson's basement was indeed flooded, and Oscar and I spent the next 4 hours moving soggy boxes and running shop vacs. It was the kind of unglamorous emergency work that reminded you why people paid for home warranties. But while my hands were busy with practical problems, my mind kept drifting back to Martha's garage, to the way she'd looked when the motorcycle engine started, to the moment when she'd stepped closer and kissed me. "You're distracted tonight," Oscar observed as we loaded wet carpet into his truck. "Little bit the older woman from yesterday?" "Martha, things progressing." She kissed me. Oscar straightened up, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "What do you feel about that? Confused? Interested? Worried about her daughter's reaction? What about your reaction?" "I liked it. then maybe focus on that instead of everyone else's reactions. Easy for you to say. You're not dating someone 17 years older with a protective daughter and a controlling ex-husband? No, I'm dating someone 3 years younger with commitment, issues, and a tendency to disappear for weeks at a time. Everyone's got complications, Henry. The question is whether the person is worth the complications, and is she? I thought about Martha's laugh, about the way she'd talked about not wanting to be someone who planned to live instead of actually living, about the vulnerability in her voice when she'd asked if I felt it too. Yeah, I said. Then stop overthinking it and see what happens. Which sounded like excellent advice, assuming I could figure out how to follow it. I didn't hear from Martha for 3 days. Not a text, not a call, not even a manufactured excuse about a squeaky hinge or a loose doorknob. By Thursday afternoon, I was starting to wonder if she'd taken that 50-50 chance of moving to another state and run with it. Then Robin called. Henry, this is Robin Hodgkins. We met at my mother's house, I remember. Is everything okay? That depends on your definition of okay. My mother fell off a ladder yesterday trying to change a light bulb in her dining room. She's fine, she added quickly, but she twisted her ankle and has some impressive bruises on her shoulder. The doctor says she needs to stay off the ankle for a few days. Is she asking for help? Or are you? I'm asking. She's being stubborn about accepting help from anyone, which is why I'm calling you directly. There was something in Robin's tone that suggested this wasn't entirely about twisted ankles and stubborn mothers. What do you need me to do? Could you stop by? Check on her? She's been different since you fixed her garage door. More secretive, more defensive. When I ask about her day. And now she's hurt and refusing to let me help. But maybe she'll listen to you. It was a peace offering of sorts, wrapped in concern for her mother's physical well-being. But underneath it I heard something else. Robin was beginning to suspect that whatever was happening between Martha and me wasn't going away. I'll stop by this afternoon. Thank you, and Henry. I may have been overprotective when we first met. I'm trying to be better about that. Martha's house looked the same from the outside, but when she answered the door, I could see the strain immediately. She was favoring her left ankle. And there was a careful way she held her left shoulder that suggested everything hurt more than she was willing to admit. You look terrible, I said. Thank you. It's exactly what every woman wants to hear. You know what I mean? She let me in, moving slowly. And I noticed she'd set up a temporary command center in the living room. Books, remote controls, water, bottle, phone charger, everything within arm's reach of the couch. Robin called you, she said. It wasn't a question. She's worried about you. She's worried about a lot of things, most of which are none of her business. Martha lowered herself onto the couch with the careful movements of someone trying not to show how much pain she was in. I sat in the chair across from her, noting the dark circles under her eyes and the way she seemed smaller somehow, like the injury had knocked more than just her physical confidence. What happened? Stupidity happened. The dining room chandelier has been flickering for weeks, and I decided to change the bulbs myself, rather than call you again and have to explain why I was calling you again. And I underestimated both the height of the ceiling and the stability of my stepladder. Lesson learned. Why didn't you call me? She was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at her front yard. Because I've been thinking about what you said, about taking things slow, about getting to know each other without everyone else's opinions drowning out our own. Okay. And I realized I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to date someone. How to have a relationship that isn't defined by other people's expectations. For 23 years, I was Richard's wife. Before that, I was someone's daughter, someone's student, someone's employee. I don't think I've ever just been Martha, seeing what happens. So you've been avoiding me to figure out how to be Martha? I've been avoiding you because every time we're together, I forget to be careful. I forget about the age difference. I forget about Robin's concerns. I forget about all the reasons this is complicated. And that scares me. I leaned forward in my chair. What scares you about forgetting to be careful? Is that I'll make decisions based on how I feel instead of what makes sense? That I'll convince myself this is something it's not? That I'll get hurt or worse? That I'll hurt you? Martha, kissed you in my garage, Henry. I kissed you because in that moment it felt like the most natural thing in the world. But afterward, lying in bed that night, I started thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. Such as you realizing that 53 is older than you thought when you see me first thing in the morning without makeup. Such as people assuming you're with me for money or security or some kind of mother complex. Such as Robin never speaking to me again because she thinks I've lost my mind. She shifted on the couch, wincing slightly. Such as me falling for you completely and then watching you realize you want someone your own age, who doesn't come with adult children and ex-husbands, and decades of baggage. The honesty in her voice was painful to hear, partly because I could see how much it cost her to say it, and partly because some of her fears weren't entirely unreasonable. So you fell off a ladder to avoid dealing with any of that? I fell off a ladder because I was trying to prove I could handle my own problems without depending on anyone else. The avoiding part was just coincidental. How's that working out for you? She looked at her elevated ankle, at the ice pack on her shoulder, at the evidence of her independence gone wrong. Not great, she admitted. I stood up and walked over to the couch. Move over, Henry. ... Just move over. She shifted, and I sat down next to her, careful not to jostle her injured side. For the record, I said, 53 looks good on you at any time of day. People can assume whatever they want about my motivations, their assumptions say. More about them than about me? And if Robin never speaks to you again because you're happy, then Robin has bigger problems than your dating life? And the baggage? Everyone has baggage. At least yours is interesting. She leaned against me carefully, and I felt some of the tension go out of her shoulders. I missed you, she said quietly. I missed you too, even though I've been ridiculous. Especially because you've been ridiculous. It means you care about this as much as I do. Martha's ankle healed faster than her confidence. But by the following week, she was moving around normally and had started talking about the motorcycle again. Not just talking planning. She'd bought a helmet, ordered riding boots online, and downloaded a motorcycle safety course app to her phone. I want to take the basic rider course, she announced over coffee on Tuesday morning. It's a weekend class, and if I pass, I get my license updated. That's great. I'm terrified. That's normal. Will you come with me? Not to take the class, just for moral support? The riding course was held at the community college parking lot, and Martha showed up Saturday morning looking like she was preparing for battle. New helmet, new boots, new leather jacket that made her look younger and more dangerous. She was also pale as milk and gripping her car keys like a lifeline. I can't do this, she said, as we watched the instructor set up orange cones in precise patterns. You bought a motorcycle? You can do this? Buying it was easy? This requires actual competence. There were 8 other students in the class, ranging from teenagers to a man who looked to be in his 70s. Martha was the only woman over 40, and I watched her take note of this fact with the kind of keen awareness of someone who'd spent her life, being conscious of where she fit. But something remarkable happened once she got on the practice bike. The nervousness didn't disappear, but it transformed into focus. She listened carefully to every instruction, practiced each maneuver methodically, and approached the challenges with the same determination I'd seen when she was standing up to. Richard, by lunch break, she was grinning. I remember this, she said, pulling off her helmet. The feeling of everything depending on balance and timing and trusting yourself. You're a natural. I'm rusty, but it's coming back. She looked at the practice course at the other students, comparing notes over sandwiches, forgot how good it feels to learn something new. What else do you want to learn? She was quiet for a moment, watching a teenage boy practice tight turns around the cones. I want to plan a trip, not just dream about it, actually plan it. Pick a destination, book hotels, figure out routes. Where would you go? Maybe the Blue Ridge Parkway. Richard always said it was too far, too impractical, too dangerous on a motorcycle. But I used to dream about riding those mountain curves, stopping at overlooks, taking pictures of places I'd never seen. Sounds perfect. Would you ... double quotes, she started, then stopped herself. Would I what? Would you want to come with me? I mean, eventually, after I get comfortable riding again. I know it's presumptuous, and you probably have better things to do than babysit a middle-aged woman on her quarter-life crisis adventure. ... Martha. What? Yes. Her smile was brighter than the October sunshine, really. Really? Robin appeared. walking across the parking lot with the determined stride of someone who'd finally located what she'd been looking for. "Mom called and said she was taking a motorcycle class," Robin said when she reached us. I had to see this for myself. Martha's entire demeanor shifted, the confidence and joy disappearing behind a wall of defensive preparation. "Robin, what are you doing here?" "Supporting you, believe it or not." Robin looked at the practice course, at her mother in full riding gear, at the obvious evidence that this wasn't just a whim. "Though I have to admit, seeing you actually doing this is more terrifying than I expected. I'm being careful. I can. See that? And you look." Robin paused, studying her mother's face. "Happy. You look really happy." Before Martha could respond, the instructor called everyone back to the course. But I caught Robin watching her mother navigate the practice exercises with an expression I hadn't seen before. Pride mixed with worry. But mostly pride. After Martha passed her test that afternoon, Robin was the first to congratulate her. The crisis came on a Thursday morning. Delivered by registered mail and signed for by Martha, with hands that started shaking the moment she read the return address. By the time I arrived for what had become our regular coffee meeting, she was sitting at her kitchen table, staring at legal documents spread across the surface like evidence of a crime. "Richard's filed a petition to have me declared financially incompetent," she said without looking up. I sat down across from her, scanning the papers. Legal jargon, but the intent was clear. Richard was arguing that Martha's recent financial decisions demonstrated impaired judgment and that someone needed to oversee her spending. On what grounds? Early retirement without consultation, purchase of an impractical vehicle, spending on home improvements without regard for property value, and failure to sign pension paperwork in a timely manner. Her voice was flat, emotionless, apparently. "He's been documenting everything since the divorce was finalized. Can he do this? According to my attorney, he can petition? Whether it goes anywhere depends on whether he can prove I'm actually incompetent rather than just making choices he disagrees with." I studied Martha's face, looking for the anger I expected, but finding only a tired resignation that worried. Me more than fury would have. What does this mean practically? It means a court hearing, a forensic accountant going through my finances, possibly a psychological evaluation. It means Richard gets to put my entire life under a microscope and argue that wanting to ride a motorcycle at 53 is evidence of mental instability. "Martha, this is harassment, this is Richard, and he can't control something directly. He finds legal ways to do it indirectly." My phone rang. Oscar, probably with another emergency repair job. I let it go to voicemail, but it rang again immediately. "Answer it," Martha said. The world doesn't stop for my problems. But it wasn't. A work emergency. Oscar was calling to tell me that Mrs. Patterson had mentioned Martha's situation to her neighbor, who'd mentioned it to someone at the post office, who'd mentioned it to her sister-in-law. Now half the town was talking about Richard Abrams, trying to have his ex-wife declared incompetent. "People are pissed," Oscar said. "Everyone remembers what a control freak he was when they were married. Madeline Booth is organizing something, says she's not going to let that man destroy Martha's life just because she had the sense to divorce him." After I hung up, Martha was looking at me with curiosity, rather than despair, for the first time since I'd arrived. "Who's Madeline Booth? Runs the flower shop downtown. Apparently she's not a fan of your ex-husband." "Most people aren't. Once they get to know him." 20 minutes later, Madeline Booth knocked on Martha's door. She was a small, fierce woman in her 60s, with silver hair and the kind of energy that suggested she'd spent her life getting things done rather than waiting for someone else to do them. "Martha Hodgkins," she said, walking straight into the kitchen without waiting for an invitation. "I've been wanting to meet you properly for months. Heard you bought that beautiful motorcycle from the Hendersons' estate sale? You did? I was bidding on it myself, but when I saw how your face lit up when you looked at it, I knew it belonged with you." Madeline sat down at the kitchen table, moving the legal documents aside like they were nothing more than junk mail. "Now, what are we going to do about this nonsense from your ex-husband?" Honey, when a man tries to destroy a woman for having the audacity to live her own life, it becomes everyone's business, especially when that woman just learned to ride a motorcycle and is clearly having more fun than he can stand. Madeline Booth turned out to be the kind of person who treated legal challenges like community organizing projects. Within 2 days, she'd assembled what she called Martha's Competency Committee, a collection of neighbors, former colleagues, and local business owners who were prepared to testify about Martha's character, judgment, and mental state. "The key," explained Henry Preston, "Martha's attorney and no relation to me despite the shared surname, is demonstrating that all of your recent decisions show careful thought and reasonable judgment, not impaired mental capacity." We sat in Kathy's office Tuesday afternoon, surrounded by financial records, witness statements, and documentation of everything Martha had done since her divorce. Robin had taken time off work to be there, and I was surprised when Kathy asked me to stay. "Perspective is important," she said. "He's observed Martha making decisions, can speak to her thought processes, and frankly, the fact that she's in a stable relationship with someone who clearly respects her judgment undermines Richard's narrative about emotional instability is." "That what this is?" Martha asked, looking at me. "Stable relationship? Getting more stable every day?" I said. The hearing was scheduled for Friday morning. Thursday night, Martha couldn't sleep. I found her in the garage at 11 p.m., sitting on the motorcycle she still hadn't ridden outside of the practice course. "Having second thoughts?" I asked. "About the hearing? About us? About everything?" She ran her hands over the handlebars. "Richard's attorney called Kathy today. They're offering to drop the petition if I agree to a financial oversight arrangement. Basically, I'd have to get approval for any expenditure over $500. "What did you tell them?" "I told them to go to hell, but politely, because Kathy was listening." I leaned against the workbench. "What are you afraid of?" "That maybe he's right. Maybe buying a motorcycle at 53 is crazy. Maybe dating someone 17 years younger is evidence of poor judgment. Maybe I am having some kind of breakdown and just can't see it. Martha, look at me." She turned toward me, and in the dim garage light I could see the doubt and exhaustion in her face. "You learned to ride a motorcycle because you didn't want to be someone who spent 2 years making something perfect and never used it. You took early retirement because you were burned out from caring about things you couldn't control. You started dating me because we make each other laugh and feel less alone. None of that is crazy. What if the judge doesn't see it that way? Then the judge is an idiot." The hearing lasted 3 hours. Richard's attorney presented financial records showing Martha's erratic spending patterns, and called a psychological expert who talked about latent set, bipolar disorder, and decision-making impairment. Richard himself testified about his concerns for his ex-wife's well-being with the kind of polished sincerity that made me understand why Martha had trusted him for 23 years. But then Madeline Booth took the stand and calmly explained that she'd known Martha for 15 years, had watched her teach dozens of local children, and had never seen anyone make more thoughtful decisions about what mattered most in life. Robin testified that her mother was happier and more engaged than she'd been in years. 3 former teaching colleagues spoke about Martha's intelligence and judgment. Oscar, who barely knew her, testified that anyone who could handle a motorcycle safety course and pass on the first try clearly had excellent decision-making abilities. When I took the stand, Kathy asked me to describe Martha's thought process when she bought the motorcycle. She said she didn't want to be someone who spent 2 years making something perfect and then never used it because they were afraid something might happen to it, I said. She said she didn't want to spend the rest of her life planning to live, instead of actually living. No, it was the statement of someone who'd figured out what most people never learn. That the biggest risk isn't making a mistake, it's never taking any risks at all. The judge dismissed Richard's petition with prejudice, meaning he couldn't file it again. As we left the courthouse, Martha was quiet until we reached the parking lot. "It's over," she said, like she couldn't quite believe it. "It's over. Want to go for a ride?" Martha's first real ride was on a Sunday afternoon 3 weeks after the hearing. She'd spent the intervening time practicing in empty parking lots, building confidence with slow speeds and wide turns. But this was different. This was her Honda CB750 on actual roads, with actual traffic, carrying her toward something that looked like freedom. We rode county roads for an hour, staying within her comfort zone, but pushing the boundaries just enough to matter. When we stopped for coffee at a diner 20 miles from home, Martha pulled off her helmet with the kind of grin that suggested she'd just remembered something important about herself. "I can't believe I waited this long," she said. "Shh, you weren't ready this long." "No, I was ready years ago. I just forgot I was allowed to be ready." The diner was the kind of place that served coffee in heavy white mugs and pie that tasted like someone's grandmother had made it. Martha ordered apple pie with ice cream, claiming that motorcycle riding required extra calories. And I watched her eat it with the unself-conscious pleasure of someone who'd stopped worrying about other people's expectations. I booked the Blue Ridge trip, she said between bites. "When?" "Next month, 4 days, 3 nights. I found this and that caters specifically to motorcycle riders. And I mapped out a route that hits all the scenic overlooks I've been dreaming about." Nervous, terrified, also excited, also proud of myself for booking it instead of just talking about it for another 20 years. The waitress, a woman about Martha's age with tired eyes and comfortable shoes, refilled our coffee without being asked. "Nice bike," she said to Martha. "Don't see many women your age riding solo." "I'm not solo," Martha said, nodding toward me. "He's my riding partner. Lucky guy." After she walked away, Martha looked at me across the table. "Is that what you are? My riding partner?" "Among other things." "What other things?" I reached for her hand across the Formica table. "Whatever you want me to be. That's a dangerous offer. I'm feeling dangerous lately." 6 months later, we were planning our second trip together, this time to the Pacific Coast Highway. Martha had traded her Honda Civic for a pickup truck that could haul a motorcycle trailer, reasoning that if she was going to have adventures, she might as well have the equipment for bigger adventures. Robin had started dating someone she'd met at the courthouse, a public defender who apparently found her protective instincts charming rather than suffocating. She still worried about her mother, but it was the normal kind of worry that came from love rather than the controlling kind that came from fear. Richard had moved to Florida with Stephanie and occasionally sent Christmas cards that Martha threw away without opening. Madeline Booth had started a women's motorcycle club that met monthly at Martha's house. Because according to Madeline, Martha's garage was the perfect size for planning adventures, and her coffee was strong enough to fuel them, and me. I was still fixing garage doors and leaky faucets and all the practical problems that came with houses and lives that were actively being lived. But I was also learning to ride mountain curves, to plan routes through unfamiliar territory, to wake up next to someone who believed that the biggest risk wasn't making a mistake. It was never taking any risks at all that Tuesday morning. When I had answered Martha's call about a garage door that sounded like a dying elephant, I thought I was just going to fix something mechanical and collect my fee. I had no idea I was walking into the beginning of everything that mattered. Sometimes the best things in life start with the simplest requests for help. Sometimes fixing someone's garage door means discovering that you're both ready to open new doors you didn't even know existed. Sometimes 53, 36 add up to exactly the right equation for whatever comes next. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.